Hey there, Ken. How are you?
Hi, Gwen. Good morning. Happy Friday. It's a great day to do this.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, hello, everybody. For those of you who are tuning in live and those of you who have been with us before, you'll notice that I'm not Erno. Erno is starting his European holiday today or tomorrow. And so I'm filling in for the next couple of weeks. And I'm very pleased to have my guest here with me, Ken Yarina. And now this is the first time I have, well, it's not the first time I've hosted this podcast, but I'm going to take a moment just to kind of look and see how who is on before I ask you questions.
Okay.
Okay, so I see the chat. Okay, I've got the chat going, so I can see if people chime in. So I just wanted to make sure I had that in view. Okay, so I have a multifaceted leader with us this morning, um, and we're going to have a conversation about, um, well, new product development and team dynamics and whatever else we decide to talk about, whatever
Sounds
else comes up.
be
So,
free
Ken,
ranging.
yeah, free range discussion. So, Ken, why don't you tell us a little bit about your career and um, and yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so my name's Ken. Welcome, everybody. And Gwen, thank you so much for hosting me on the Coach um, Coach Me to Lead podcast. And I guess first and foremost, I'm just a chemical engineer. That's what I went to school for. I was the kid that took things apart all around the house and then tried to figure out how to put it back together. I played with fire a lot as a child, and that prompted me to become a chemical engineer. And I even went to graduate school for, honest to God, graduate school for combustion chemistry is what I went to school for. So I did play with fire as a kid, and I'm formally educated to play with fire. And then I've had a nice career. I go, you weren't expecting that, were you?
No, I
So
wasn't. I didn't know that about you.
So early on, I had an internship at a wonderful company in the Midwest called 3M Company, and I met some really fantastic people that did new to the world technologies, and it was really, I would say, very instrumental in changing my career path from being a traditional engineer to getting into research and development, which I did. I ended up going to graduate school and making diamonds out of thin air with the U.S. government. Again, another fantastic lab in Washington D.C. And I thought research was going to be my career path until I realized what I actually wanted to do was product development. And there's a big difference between research and product development. Maybe we can come back to that theme later because it's really interesting when you develop a new product how those perspectives are really synergistic and it's sometimes in conflict on a team. Um, so I've had a number of roles from process development engineer, product engineer, quality engineer. I've led teams. I was a senior manager of systems engineering. As an R&D manager. I led a small team of black belts at a medical device company that emphasized good product development practices. And all along the all along my career path, my guiding theme, my vision, my guiding light is to bring new products and technologies to market. That's what I'm passionate about, and I've approach that from a variety of angles and as parts of teams, team leaders, or managers throughout my career. So I'm happy to talk about this theme of team dynamics, especially in the context of bringing a new product to market. So that's me.
Hmm, fascinating. Well, you know, one of the things that, I've known you for a little bit, and
Should we tell people that
as you
we've
were
known each
just,
other for a few years, right?
yeah, we have.
Okay.
Yep. Not really well, but I mean, I didn't know you were this pyromaniac, but, you know, there's always something new to learn.
I said combustion
Um,
chemistry. You said pyromaniac.
okay, okay.
For the record.
Well, speaking of, uh, when I first met you, and some of your colleagues at 3M, uh, you know, working with PhD scientists was a little intimidating for me.
Oh, I didn't.
And one thing I've really appreciated about you is how you do, um, you 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 speak in terms that I can understand. So you're great at telling stories and giving examples that I can relate to. That's I've really appreciated that. So so even though you're in the world of new product development and I am not familiar with all that entails, I have learned a lot from you about what that means. So I really appreciate that. So in terms of teams, can you tell me a little bit about what you find in a typical team? What have you seen any patterns, or what are the kinds of things you have noticed about teams?
Sure. I would say that, well, the straightforward answer is there is no typical team. But that's sort of a cop out. I mean, there are some commonalities amongst all groups. So when you're talking about a team, you have a group of people that are coming together for a common purpose to deliver something of value to the organization, or ideally to your customer, or in my sense to the universe, right? So something you want to bring out to the world that maybe didn't exist before. And so I think some common themes on new product development teams are, I always call it a full contact sport, because on a new product team, you don't just have like one skill set. You you have to have, and over time you'll have every single function in the company involved in that new product launch. So the one common theme is that you often have people with a variety of specialized skill sets. So you may have a research person who knows something about the molecules or the chemistry or the process that maybe they want to have a patent on or they think will work. And they're very, very technically savvy. And then you may have somebody who knows nothing about that, but they understand a lot about maybe the market conditions or the current customers. And they have a very different set of skill sets and maybe even a different educational background. You may have a business person who has a history degree trying to help you launch a microbiology product to the world. And so the theme is that you have people of very different sort of educational backgrounds that you have to piece together in a puzzle to make something good. That's, I think, the common theme.
Cool.
Mhm.
And what have you seen over time in terms of, as um, resources shrink in organizations,
Mhm.
people have to be more efficient about their time. So you're talking about these specialized folks who are put on a
Sure.
team, but they don't necessarily need to be there for everything. They don't need to, and they don't need to know about all the different aspects. Like, how do you manage that when you've got people do you have people popping in and out? And how do you keep them aligned and moving in the same direction?
Oh my goodness.
Sorry, that's a big that's
I
the
was
$1 million question. I didn't tell you I was going to ask that. Sorry.
No, you didn't. Well, totally unprepared. Well, I think what you hit on the head is really one of the key challenges in new product development is that everybody wants to know everything. But as soon as you start having too many meetings, you slow the whole thing down and nobody starts creating anything new. So once you've caught everybody up to what's happening, if you do that 100% effectively, you've kind of spent all your time regurgitating things that most of the people already knew, but someone else didn't know. I don't know if that probably didn't make any sense, but what I'm trying to
No, it
say
does. It does.
is that communication then becomes a key element of an effective team dynamic. And I wasn't prepared to talk about this, but there's that network model. And I can't remember the equation off the top of my head, but if you have me and you, we can keep ourselves in contact pretty easily. If there's
Hmm.
3 people, 4 people, 5 people, and you think of the number of one-on-one conversations that are possible, it's an exponential function. So as soon as you get to like 10 or 14 people involved, you have, I think it's over 1,000 individual communication pathways that can happen. And so I feel a real essential element of communication with the stakeholders to make sure as a team leader, you're aligned with what the organization needs for the team. That's full stop. That falls on the shoulders of generally one person, and that's whoever is in charge of the team. Program manager is a good title for that person. Second, you have to disseminate that information fully to all the people on the team. That's also the job of a good program manager. And people will go off in their own direction pretty often. And I think you mentioned two themes. One is, how do you keep communication going? And the first that you said was, when you have limited resources, as budgets get constrained, how does that impact things? And it really negatively impacts things, because as you burden people 100%, they have no free time to sit back and think about what they're doing. And if you multitask people, the cost of task switching becomes insane. So it's like trying to clean your house by doing the bathroom for 10 minutes and then doing the kitchen for 10 minutes and then doing your laundry for 10 minutes. You don't get anything done. So you really, in other words, you have to keep the team aligned and let them work on fewer things, but get them done. And I took a couple. I wasn't smart enough to figure it out the first time, but there was a great consulting firm that came in and taught at a company that I worked at, and it's called ProChain, so free advertisement for them. But there was a gentleman named Norman Patnode, who I think might even be on the call today, because I learned a ton.
He is.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's chatting in. I'll tell you what he's saying.
Yeah, and his there's a bunch of simulations. I think Rizzo's Beads is one, about making sure the team is focused on one thing at a time and then get it done. I think Norman used to drill into my head: prioritize, focus, and finish.
Yep, that's in the chat.
And so that really is the key to communication. You have to align with what the goal of the project is, write that on the wall so people don't forget it, and then remind everybody. My comment with teams is always, let's keep the main thing the main thing. And if there's anybody who's worked with me on the phone, they were probably laughing right now, because you have to keep the main thing the main thing. That's really what the challenge of product development is keeping that front and center.
So now Norman has put in what looks to me like an engineering comment. Number of communication paths equal n, and in parentheses, n minus 1 divided by 2. If I'm even saying that right. This would be an engineering thing that I'm not quite sure. But what does that mean?
Oh, it just means that if you have one person, you have no communication path because there's nobody to talk to. But then you plug in 2 into that equation. 2 times 2 minus 1 is what is that? I don't want to do math on the fly because I'll really screw it up. But it grows pretty quickly. It grows really quickly. That's the point. And so the challenge is then, what are the mechanisms by which you can either aggregate the communication channels, so create sub-teams, so that you have one sub-team with only 3 or 4 people working on an element of your total program. Let them talk as frequently as they can because there's fewer communication paths, and then have them come back to a larger team and report out on their progress, report out on their issues, and then especially at the interface with other teams, provide them a forum where they can ask for support from other teams, either the core team or a marketing team, for questions they need answered. But that gets into like how you structure the dynamics of a team. If you have a team meeting, how often you bring in stakeholders, and there's more than one model for that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about, today, so much of our work is done remotely or across the globe. So what do you think are some best practices for doing that?
For remote
What have
for
you?
remote teams?
Yeah, yeah. And I know, at 3M, most everybody works on global teams of some sort.
Sure.
So, um,
Well,
so you probably have a lot of experience with that.
there are. I think the pandemic has given everyone a whole bunch of
Yeah, that's true.
new skills around how to sit in front of your monitor and be more effective. Um, the first thing that comes to mind is if you're having a meeting, like Gwen, I'm talking to you, and we're not in the same room. We are in the same city, but it's really helpful, I think, to have your camera on. That's kind of I think, a no-brainer, at least for a portion of the
Hmm.
meeting. Another best practice
Hmm.
for team dynamics is to start your meetings 10 minutes early as like a coffee 10 minutes, and
Mm,
just spend that time
formal. Hmm.
like you normally would when you're in a physical location, to just chat. A really interesting technique that I've used is, if you go to Google Maps, maps.google.com, you can create a custom map and you can add stick pins. And a really neat technique is, if you have a global team, ask each person on the global team, you send them the link ahead of time, and they can put a stick pin as to where they're located. Maybe the factory is located, maybe your customers are located, and you can build a team map of geographically where everybody is. And it sounds simple, but it is so much fun to do that with a team. I was recently working with a team in some of the team was in Minneapolis, where I am. Some of the team was in the United Kingdom. Some of the team was in the Middle East. And everybody had their stick pins up there, and it's really fascinating. And then, as team building activities, you can ask people to tell you about their region or what's happening locally, or a good restaurant, or a favorite food.
Hmm.
Those are
Hmm.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was so fascinating to me during the pandemic to have clients in India and everywhere else in the world and just learn how they were experiencing the pandemic. It was
Oh, absolutely.
fascinating
Right.
and so profound to think that we're all going through this together.
During,
That, the only thing ever probably in our lifetime where we will all be going through the same thing at the same
yeah,
time. Yeah.
once is enough for me. I had beers in my backyard with a
Yeah.
gentleman in Germany. We were just like, we should get together and talk. And
Were you drinking a German beer? That's the
I
question.
did. I bought special beer just to connect with him.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So, what do you think are the,
Can I add one thing to that, though? It's kind of
yes,
what I call
yes,
a watch
please.
out, right? So when you have global meetings and when you have virtual meetings, there's a tendency that I've found that I think is a problem. And I'm curious how you guys would coach to deal with it. It's that if you and I
Mm,
are having a conversation, or if you're doing a program update to stakeholders, sometimes people, you may have 25 people on a call, or 30 people, maybe global. Some of them may be at very different ranks in the organization. Instead of interrupting the speaker and asking a question like you would do in a conference room, or if somebody
hmm.
is not understanding what you're sharing, in a conference room, you can see body language and expressions. But if your cameras are off, there's this dynamic of people in the background one-on-one texting each other. And
Hmm.
I find that to be somewhat troublesome, because it kills the team dynamic, because people are having side conversations and sometimes
Hmm.
not paying attention to what you're discussing, or solving all other problems for the team. So how do you keep, what's a good recommendation to keep stakeholders clued in as you're virtually presenting things?
Oh, wow. That's a tricky one because you know, it depends, the culture. What I see in the culture in most organizations is that that's seen as a positive thing because you're getting your work done.
Hmm.
So you're using your time effectively, but you're basically multitasking.
Right,
So you can't focus on one thing at a time.
right.
And so you're not totally present for the meeting. Um, and I do think that's troublesome. Um, but it's one of those things that you probably can't stop it from
Sure,
happening.
sure.
um, as the presenter, I think what you can do is engage the audience and ask questions,
That's a good idea.
and build in activities so that people have to respond to you.
Right.
And you can, that way you can tell if people are paying attention or if they've tuned out, gone to let the dog out or something.
Okay.
We have a comment here from Benjamin Wilson. I found encouraging discussion in the chat to be very helpful, especially with ESL participants. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I would say
Yeah.
that.
So people can ask questions. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and here's a tip from Norman. Present as a pair where one monitors the camera images and chat with the intent of putting questions on the table where they can. That's another
We should
good
do
one.
that now. So if you're
We
online
should
and
do that.
listening, follow Ben's lead and type a comment to the group if Gwen and I are missing something, or if you have something valuable to add. I'd love to. I'm always a learner.
Yeah, thank you. Great. So, comment? No, I thought you were
I don't
going
have a
off in
comment.
another direction.
No, I'm on my best behavior today.
Oh, well. I was thinking about, I was meeting with my Coachdotme team this morning, and we're talking about how we want to build a community around helping leaders be resilient. Oh, and then Ben also chimed in with chat also creates a record of the discussion to review later, which is really good. But back to our Coach.me team, what we want to do is create a community where leaders can come together and share their thinking and challenges that they're having.
Yeah, no, hold on a sec. So there was a question. There's a private chat that I think only you and I can see. How do people get on the public chat that Ben has put on there? Maybe Ben type that in.
I think you gave them the link to the internal private chat. I think you gave that there in the meeting that way.
Oh, okay.
So actually I could turn the camera on and bring them into the conversation if you want to.
Let's just keep it simple. Your first time,
yeah.
it's my first time.
Yeah. I don't have a producer.
Let's stick with the basics here.
Yeah. So I only see private chat. Oh, how do you get to, okay, yeah. Yeah, so it's a different link, Norman, and
it's a LinkedIn thing.
Yeah. So my please forgive me. It's my first time doing this and setting it up, and I gave Ken a couple different links, and so one of them was inside, and one of them was at LinkedIn in Restream, and that's some technical thing that obviously is not my forte. So,
moving on.
Yes. So, okay, going back to this resilient leaders community. Ooh, the room is full and a guest is trying to join. Wow. I think that there are only 10 seats in the inside room, in the Restream room. So, but we have a recording. We will be posting it. Once again, back to the resilient leaders, helping build resilient leaders for a better world. One of the things, so can I ask you a question about one of the observations I've had?
Sure.
And something that is, oh, here, let me post. How can I, I can post, yes, thank you, Ben. Thank you. Ben is helping us out here. He's our producer. He posted the LinkedIn, yeah. So one of the things that I've noticed in working with corporations, both those I've belong to as an employee, and then those that I've worked with as an outside consultant,
Sure. Sure.
is that, the corporate culture, oh, now I'm echoing. Now what?
We're going to just have to push through the technical challenges.
Okay. One of the things that I notice in corporate culture, and it's been this way for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
that people who are young and appear to be ambitious get promoted, and into leadership positions, formal leadership positions,
Mm-hmm.
and people who want to focus on their family and raise their families first, spend their time doing that and focusing on their technical skills, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily their formal leadership skills. And then by
Sure.
the time their kids are ready to graduate and they're ready to take on more responsibility and have more time and freedom to
Right.
travel, because many management positions require a lot of travel,
Sure.
then then they are no longer getting invited to those
Oh,
positions. And I think that from my perspective, I see that as so sad, because we've got people who have matured
yeah.
and have really great skills and want to contribute in a leadership role, and they are the kind of people you'd want to have as your leaders.
Sure.
But the time has kind of passed for them.
Right. Right.
So, I think this is a topic that I would like the corporate world to address.
Right. We will fix that next week. What's your
Yeah, thank you.
So you're saying that you feel like people choose early on in their careers to either climb the ladder or maybe focus on family for whatever reason, and then later on they
Hmm.
end up in different career trajectories, and then the people who've chosen individual skills have kind of fallen behind. Do you have a question out of that, or
Hmm.
something you want to crystallize and talk
Well,
about?
yeah. Um, I guess I'd be interested in knowing, from our guests, our listeners' perspectives, if they see that is a thing. Um, and what thoughts do you have about um, providing more opportunities for people who are senior technical professionals and want
Mm-hmm.
to move into leadership, but they're older?
Sure. Sure. Why don't we let the chat fill up
This
with some
sounds very
answers?
serious.
It does. Let's let the chat fill up with a couple of maybe responses that we can read in a moment here. But I'll field that question first, since I'm on the
While we were
hot
thinking
seat
about it.
here. Um,
Okay.
here's some
Okay.
things I've noticed, that, like, I've been a high potential, I've been not a high potential, I've been in different companies. Sometimes I've been the expert that everyone goes to. Sometimes I've definitely not been the expert everyone goes to. And I think my perspective, and it goes back to new product development and team dynamics, is that everybody has a competency or a mastery that they are really proud of and that they like to bring forward for the team. And I think the challenge of organizations or managers or program managers is to identify that skill set amongst your people as quickly as possible and promote that to the other people on the team.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like putting this puzzle
Mm-hmm.
together, and you want to identify the skills that people have as a mastery. And not everyone, certainly not everyone's the same. Some people are very outgoing and are not afraid of making a mistake, and other people want to sit back and really process data. And I think so. The three rules I have for people on my teams to help them be Ben just typed it in. I was almost just going to say this. So I worked with Ben in the past, and it's something that a gentleman named Dan Pink had, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If you can tick those three boxes for every person on your team, you'll have a high performing team.
Mm-hmm.
And to promote coaching, Gwen, I would say that part of the problem is that organizations identify their top 10% of employees. They call them high potential. And then all of the development dollars from human resources and org development and networking is poured into 1 out of 10 employees that they perceive for whatever
Mhm.
reason as high potential. And that leaves 9 out of 10 people in the workforce sort of not getting the same. They have good seeds, but they're not being watered or tended as frequently by the
Mhm.
organization. And so I
Mhm.
really see, and why I agreed to do this with you is some of the services that you offer and some of these next generation online services offer is democratizing that executive coaching experience that I found so valuable
Mhm.
and giving it to the 9 out of 10 people so they understand how to recognize their own skills and skills in other people and bring those out. So I don't know, do you have
Mhm.
any comments about what's trending
Yeah.
in the industry to promote that?
Well, yeah, I think, I think, and I've seen this for a few years now, that I think the trend is going away from formal leadership development, where you kind of everybody gets fed the same stuff, and and uh, and actually it's more effective to have individual leadership coaches where people can really work on their individual goals and their individual issues that they want to resolve and get expert help. So I think, I mean, personally, I always have a coach. I find it really helpful and essential. And I think that that's becoming more and more common. And like you said, Coachdotme is a way that people can access a coach more affordably. So it is democratizing it.
Okay.
So yeah, Ben talks about, oh yeah, he had a mentor, and oh yeah, well, a mentor named Ken, I guess, that talked about the Dan Pink's concept of autonomy. What was it? Autonomy,
Mastery, purpose.
mastery, and purpose. And then Norman says skill sets and level of cognitive ability. I'm a fan of Elliot Jock. Recommend executive leadership as a starting point. Oh, thank you. Great. And then letting your manager know if you're a person who um, yeah, that make it known that that's what you're interested in. If you didn't take opportunities earlier and you're ready now, let management know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also in addition to that, I would recommend people, if you think you have that interest if you think you'll have that interest in the future, to also continue to develop your leadership
Mm-hmm.
skills along the way, so that you're not just thinking as an individual contributor all the way along, and then all of a sudden you flip over because
Sure.
your mindset will have to shift. Um, and then Melanie Day says, I agree with your comment about Aline, and would add that an individual could consider communicating to managers outside of their reporting structure, in addition to their manager, to create expanded awareness of the individual who is now ready to lead. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Sure.
And Aline responds with, within the team, the project manager could also provide the opportunity to lead for those senior individuals who are now ready to lead. Yeah,
Let me
yeah, great comments.
let me add something to that, Gwen, that I think
Yeah.
kind of furthers the conversation. So I've been indirect leading of teams, and I've also had direct reports on teams. And one of the tactics that I use as a manager is have a discussion, biweekly or monthly around goals and objectives. How are you performing? How are your projects progressing? More recently, I found I don't. There's a second conversation I think has to happen from your manager around what are your development goals, what's your 5-year vision, and where do you want to be, so that the manager can then identify on the job learning possibilities or training or
Mm-hmm.
maybe an
Mm-hmm.
entirely different career assignment. And I found that happened to me. I had some really great managers early in my career that I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for them investing in me early in my career, because it changed my trajectory. And I would just encourage anybody to pick up on a few of the comments and kind of weave them together. If your manager is not having a development discussion with you, like I would always have with my direct reports, and actually witnessing them moving things for you, like, listen,
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this. Maybe you're tired of it and you want to then move on. Um, um, you know, keep the ask your manager for development opportunities, and then have, as a manager, provide those opportunities for your direct reports. Because what I find in some really senior people is they look back and they think the only path to get where they are as a vice president or whatever is the path they took. And you have to remind them that there are many
Mm-hmm.
paths up the mountain and to help
Mm-hmm.
with development. So, Gwen, maybe what's some examples of good development opportunities that you would coach executives on to provide
Oh,
for their
wow.
people? I caught you with that one, didn't I?
Yeah, I mean, it could be almost anything. And we've got some, the chat is blowing up here. Um, oh, so Patrick Fisher mentions it's good to keep the conversations separate. So those career conversations, keep them separate. So you're not running out of time and you're not trying to push all your current work discussions into your
Mm-hmm.
career conversation. So keeping them separate. Also, it keeps the tone of the conversation clean, I think. And then he also says, and ensure action items from those development discussions both ways. So what you're talking about of finding opportunities and then the manager following up on them.
Sure.
Let's see. I'm a fan. Oh, so Ben has a quote from Mark Twain. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid. I've never heard that one. Everyone has something they can, and identifying it and getting them to believe in it, its value is important. Uh, and also Norman Patnode says, the accountability for career development is best placed in the manager once removed. Your boss's boss.
That's an
Oh,
interesting one.
interesting.
I read that too. That's
Yeah,
very interesting.
yeah,
I
that
might
is
recommend,
interesting.
Gwen, I might recommend talk to Erno, and Norman would be a fantastic future guest
Oh,
for you,
that'd be great. Hey,
because I would,
Norman,
yeah, 2 thumbs up. That I learned a lot from Norman about, yeah,
well, Norman,
he's probably forgotten
here's your
more than I know.
invitation. Norman, I'll be reaching out to you. So let me know if you're willing to be a guest. Um, let's see. Where did we? Where did we? Was I supposed to answer something? Did you ask me a question,
I
or did
did,
I?
and you artfully dodged it by reading
I
comments.
did. I
Right.
did.
No, it's and I think we are sort of nearing the last 5 or 10 minutes of the podcast, but I think the question was, how would you coach managers to then help their employees with development discussions, so that you're sort of coaching the coach, so to speak, so they don't just focus on the daily grind, which I've experienced that, where it's get it done now, and if not, you're out the door,
Mm-hmm,
versus get it done well. And by the way,
mm-hmm,
how can I help you make your career something you're proud of and something that
mm-hmm.
you want to do? So how would you coach executive leadership? Like, I'm talking R&D managers, directors, vice presidents, to ensure that their people feel like there's a future.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good question because, if you've experienced a manager who did that for you well, then you have an example to follow. But I know that it is a scary thing for a lot of managers to think about giving career guidance or advice to their employees.
Mm,
And I don't think it needs to be advice. I think it needs to be encouragement and
mm.
um, drawing out the person's interests and helping them explore. So it's more of a coaching conversation than it is a directing conversation. Maybe helping them explore opportunities and helping them think.
Okay.
And I do have some great resources on that. If anybody wants to follow up with me, I'm happy to look at them. But right now, I can't remember exactly what they are, so I can't give you titles. But I know there are some great resources for that. Now, and also, I just want to say, Ken, that I'm really appreciating your approach to this conversation. That, my belief is that everybody is a leader, and anybody who's taken a program that I've led knows that that's kind of the first thing I say. That I believe we all have an impact on each other,
Mm-hmm.
and
oh my goodness!
And so,
can I tell you? Can I interrupt you for a moment?
Sure.
20 seconds. You just said everybody has an impact on everybody and we rub off on each other. I always remember the people that I've worked with. Yesterday, as I was sending out a few links for this call, someone that I worked with, this is true story, 10 years ago, immediately texted me back and said, "Oh my God, Ken, I haven't talked to you for so long. I realized something. I need to make a sincere apology to you." I won't mention any names, but this person and I worked together a number of years ago, called them. They spoke to me on the phone, and they remembered, like, in detail, conversations that we had 10 years ago, things that we were both experiencing at work. And the gist of it was there were a lot of issues, like with my father and some things, and a lot of stress at work and stuff. And his attitude was, I could have done more as your colleague to help you through tough times with your family and at work. And he was so sort of frustrated by this. And I was just so touched by how true it is that we become like a work family. And you really have these really strong connections with people that you work with. In some cases, you spend more time with people at work than you do with your own family. So I'd just like to reiterate that we do rub off on each other in hopefully positive ways.
Yeah. So that's great. Well, I think that's a great place to end, Ken. There are a couple of more comments. Helping them find their question can be really helpful, and learning and progress starts with a question. Sure. Yes. Amen to that.
Should we talk about some trending things in the future? Or is that for another podcast?
Yeah. No, well, it could be another podcast. Do you want to come back next week?
No. I'm good for this year.
Okay. All right. Yeah, well, what do you think are some trends? Do you have some ideas about trends?
Well, I just know in thinking in the past, like coming from a professional education, certain knowledge and skill sets are kind of seem like a flavor of the day, whether it's project management principles, critical chain, agile, waterfall. If you think about Six Sigma, lean, these things sort of grow, ebb and flow, I think, sometimes with the marketing prowess of whoever writes the next book. Within team building, it seems like with the emergence of like artificial intelligence, a lot more virtual computing, what do you think is trending in terms of team dynamics for the near future? And I plan on having some global teams in the very near future. How might I leverage some of the assets that you guys have at Coachdotme to help bring my teams up to speed with what's best practice to do tomorrow, not yesterday?
Yeah. Well, I think I have a couple of thoughts running through my head when you asked that. One is I've been reading a lot about reading and hearing and experiencing a lot about the new world of work, that things are changing. The dynamic between employer and the return to the office is a huge deal.
Sure.
That just in general, work, the concept of work and how we approach it as employees and employers is shifting, and what is needed to navigate that turmoil are leaders who are really empathetic and can connect with employees, um, and so helping people develop those soft skills is probably really the most important. And also, and I, personally in my own practice, I believe self-awareness is a key to good leadership, and understanding yourself and where you're coming from and where your hot buttons are, and
Sure.
being able to regulate your emotions. Those sorts of things are just really important. And I think as we go forward, as work becomes more complex, we're managing people who are in hybrid environments. They're at home and they're in the office and they're across the world and everything else. There's just so much complexity that I think leaders need support from a coach. And at Coachdotme, we have hundreds of leadership coaches, and they focus on various specific things and have specific technical backgrounds as well. So there's lots of opportunity to get support for that, because I don't think anybody can do it alone. You need to have a support,
Right.
And that's one way to get it. Yeah, and to build building internal communities in the organization to support each other. That's one of the things that when I do group coaching in an organization, the biggest benefit to people is that they have a safe place to talk to each other about what life is like in the organization.
Sure. Yep.
And it's so precious to them. So
that's a great place to end.
Yeah.
And I would just echo that. I feel like when I've been least successful is when I felt like I can't raise the real issues and talk about them in a safe environment. And when I've been the most successful is when I've had peers or sponsors that will allow me to talk something through. Like, I'm not really sure about this, but here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And you can do that over breakfast or lunch or in a meeting, and you can kind of work through the issues and then take the next step. So thank you so much for inviting me. I'm not the expert in this area, but I know you and your team are. And so I've really been happy to be interviewed with what I experience in new product development. And hopefully the audience, thank you all for attending.
Yes, and by the way, let me, for those of you who don't know Ken personally, if you snap this QR code, this takes you right to Ken's LinkedIn profile, so you can reach out to him and ask questions or start a conversation. As you can tell, he's a conversational guy, easy to talk to, and willing to expand his network. And he's got an extraordinary network as well. So a good guy to connect with. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Ken, for taking the time to be with us this morning. And thanks to everyone who tuned in and all your comments. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Gwen.